Hello, welcome to the class. Let's just dive into it and let's start off with the productivity equation. And this basically informs how I think about productivity and what the different areas of productivity that we can target with targeted interventions, what those different areas are. So what does productivity actually mean? Well, back in the day in the whole Industrial Revolution, agriculture and all that kind of stuff, productivity was the amount of production per factory or per worker or for a given day. So there's something to do with the amount of production and something to do with per unit of something. These days, we don't really think of productivity as being per worker because it's usually personal productivity that we're talking about. Instead, we think of productivity as being how much work we can get done in the smallest amount of time possible. And so those are the basic components of a productivity equation. In a way, productivity equals output divided by time. So the more output we can generate, the more productive we are. The less time that we can generate it in, the more productive we are. So those are two components of the productivity equation. But there are two more, and they're arguably the more important ones. Firstly, we need to recognize that there's no point in being productive if we are not being productive about the right things. Like you could just end up on a treadmill just kind of spinning your legs and like doing lots of exercise and stuff. But if your objective is to get somewhere and you're on a treadmill, then you're not really getting anywhere. All you're doing is burning energy. It's a similar concept in productivity. We want to be doing things efficiently and we want to be doing lots of things, but we also want to be doing the right things. And so the third component of the equation, useful. Productivity equals useful output over time. It recognizes that the output has to be useful in some way and kind of goes towards our long-term goals or our vision for life or whatever we want. But the point is we have to think about actually doing the right things. And the final aspect of the productivity equation, which is like I've never really seen talked about, is something I came up with a few days ago, which I'm very proud of. F. F is a constant that is applied to the entire equation of productivity, and F is the fun factor. And this is actually probably one of the most important things, because if I really think about it, the reason why I'm so productive and do all these things on the side on top of being a doctor is because everything I do, I really enjoy doing. When stuff is fun, it no longer feels like work. And when stuff is fun, it bleeds into all the other elements of productivity. It means that we don't have to worry about motivation, consistency, willpower, discipline, all that kind of stuff, because it's fun. Like we don't need motivation to watch Netflix or, hang out with our friends because it's fun. Equally, if we can make the useful output, if we can make the efficiency, if we can make our productive tasks enjoyable, it just supercharges absolutely everything. And so these four aspects of the equation are the things that we can target with interventions. And we're going to be coming back to this equation as we go throughout this class. And while we're here, there's another concept that I want to bring forward. And that's another kind of mental model for thinking about productivity. And the reason we're thinking about productivity to begin with is because, yes, it's all very fun and nice going after, this productivity app will change your life. But actually, it's a lot more about the habit formation. It's about how we are being productive rather than what we are using to be productive. And we'll talk more about apps and stuff in this class and in a future class dedicated just to productivity apps because everyone loves that kind of stuff. I'm a huge productivity app nerd, but actually the mental model is even more important. And the mental model for productivity is kind of threefold. And the analogy that I use to describe this, that my brother helped me come up with, is the pilot and the plane. So imagine we've got a pilot. The pilot's job is to set the course of the plane, to kind of pilot the plane, to kind of figure out what direction the plane is heading in. And then we've got the plane. And the plane's job is to be an airplane, to kind of follow the course, not deviate too much, to be able to take off efficiently, to be able to land properly, safely without killing anyone, and to be able to kind of follow the directions of the pilot without deviation. And hopefully you might be able to see where we're going with this analogy. Because the plane is us most of the time. I would say that maybe about probably 80% of our time should be in plane mode, where we are just following the instructions that the pilot has set. And maybe about 10% of our time should be in pilot mode, maybe even 15% of our time in pilot mode, which is those small moments in the day when we have clarity about what our vision, what our purpose is, what we want to be doing for the day. For me, that's usually first thing in the morning. I do my morning dump, which is what I call when I get my notebook out and just write down all the things I have to do for the day. This is where sometimes in the evenings, I will figure out what I want to do the following day. That's me being a pilot and actively piloting my life. But then once I've made that decision, for the rest of the day, I don't care about the pilot. I'm not wasting energy trying to decide what I should be doing with my time. Instead, I'm just being the plane. For 80% of the time, I am the plane. I'm executing on the instructions of the pilot. And so the pilot gives instructions to the plane. These are like different roles that we take throughout the day at different times. And I would suggest that 10% of the time is pilot, 80% of the time is plane. And then you might be wondering, what about the other 10% of the time? The other 10% of the time is what I like to call the engineer. And the job of the engineer is threefold. Firstly, the engineer needs to make sure that the plane is efficient. It needs to make sure the plane is doing its activities in a time efficient manner. Secondly, the engineer needs to make sure that the plane is fuel efficient, like it's not using excessive energy. It's not using too much energy. It's able to conserve fuel when it needs to. And thirdly, the job of the engineer is to keep the entire system organized. So that would be things like writing out a to-do list or, sorting out your favorite productivity app for quick capture and all these things that we are going to talk about. But kind of the job of the engineer feeds into the job of the pilot and kind of the job of the plane, hence the kind of dotted line going to pilot. And I would suggest that maybe we spend 5 to 10% of our time on being the engineer, on actively implementing and maintaining the organizational systems and the various kind of principles, strategies, and tools to make everything that we do more efficient. And so you'll see that the pilot, the plane, and the engineer ties into our productivity equation. So the pilot is the one who sets the course, who sets the direction of the plane. And so let's put that in green. And that is the useful component of the productivity equation. The pilot makes sure we are doing the right things. It makes sure it's useful output that we are outputting. Next, we have the plane, which is 80% of the time. The majority of our time is spent executing the orders of the pilot. And that is the output bit of the productivity equation. And finally, we have the engineer. The engineer's job is to make sure everything is efficient, organized, and fuel efficient. And that is the time component of the productivity equation. And so when we're trying to increase our productivity, we can recognize that actually it's not about increasing our productivity as a whole. It's about recognizing, do we need to work on the piloting? Do we need to work on our plane? Or do we need to work as our engineer to improve those different abilities? And then where fun comes into it is that fun just sort of ties into absolutely everything. So if, as I said at the start, if we can enjoy what we're doing, then being a pilot is more fun, being an engineer is more fun, and being a plane is infinitely more fun because the work is enjoyable. It's not something that we have to kind of talk ourselves into doing. And so that is the productivity equation. And in the rest of this class, we're going to be talking about various principles. We've got the 3 myths, the 3 laws, and the 3 powers. And I'll be explaining the theory behind those principles, but then also some practical tips that you can apply them to your life from today. Because as I said, productivity and being more productive is about changing your habits and changing your skill set. So you're a better pilot, you're a better engineer, and you're a better plane. Plane probably being the most important because that's kind of most of the time that we spend in our lives. And then in future classes, we'll really be going deep into the woods of this whole pilot, plane, engineer stuff. And I'll be sharing all the advanced and intermediate strategies, principles, tools, and stuff to help us become better pilots, planes, and engineers. But for now, we're going to focus on the abstract, high-level principles and also some general practical, actionable advice about how we can apply them to our own lives. So that was a productivity equation. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so our first class project journaling prompt is, which do I struggle with most of all, the pilot, the plane, or the engineer, and in what specific ways? And I'd really encourage you to try and be as specific as possible because, it's only when we're really honest with ourselves and actually identify what we're trying to improve that we can actually improve on it. So that's the first journaling prompt. Could you please write out your answers to that and then save them somewhere for yourself or share them in the class project section down below. Or if you want, you can write them all in one place. And then when you finish with the class, you can post them to the class project. It's entirely up to you. But yeah, I hope you have fun with that one.